Team Indovance, thank you so much for allowing us to do this today. You and your team are a true pleasure. Thank you. To the speakers that we have today, thank you for joining. Truly appreciate your time, and we truly look forward to hearing your thoughts around the issues that we see. And again, just to reiterate to the group, we are trying to find meaningful solutions and making new connections to find solutions in the current marketplace as we see it. And essentially the idea of resilience and adapting to this new way of operating is something that we all have to contend with. And it is something that presents a challenge and an opportunity. With that being said, you guys will all be on mute as participants. You can post any of your questions to me personally or to the group, and I can redirect those questions to any of our experts on the line. You can also raise your hand, and then we can answer those questions after the speakers answer the particular set of questions that we have for them. So with that being said, just wanted to start off by saying the question becomes, how do we move forward from here as an industry? We all know that the challenges that we see today present new ways of solving problems, new ways of thinking, new ways of connecting the dots, new ways of collaborating and working together as teams. The idea of distributed and remote workforces has become very real. And we all have been truly presented with an opportunity, and that is what we need to look at it as. So with that being said, whether it's new technologies in the marketplace, whether it's new ways of thinking, whether it is making new and meaningful connections as we're doing here today, everything is on the table. And the one thing that I do know, at least from my own experience in digital transformation, is that it takes an agile and creative process in order to facilitate meaningful change. My hope is that this webinar serves as a starting point, particularly for people in the renovation construction business in North America, to have a platform and a forum in order to connect with people, in order to facilitate meaningful dialogue, to find meaningful solutions to complex problems. It is one thing to operate remotely with distributed workforces and only have a distributed and remote workforce. It is quite another thing to operate with a distributed and remote workforce and also have to have a physical presence in the physical world. With that being said, there are ways in order to find efficiencies within that. And I think that is one of the real challenges we have, from supply chain economics all the way to how we collaborate and communicate as a business, as people, and as humans. So with that being said, I just wanted to prime the conversation for that. And then before we get started, guys, I also wanted to, as the right thing to do, to thank those who are on the front lines, first responders, healthcare workers, people that are putting their lives at risk in order to do the work that they do, in order to support the work that we do. So thank you for that. So with that being said, I'd like to move forward to our first speaker. Well, it's actually me. I'm just introducing myself. So my name is Garrett Owens. I'm an independent consultant. I work on behalf of Novus Building Services. My job has been, for the past couple of years since leaving digital media, to accelerate the R&D innovation and enterprise-wide digital transformation of the company. My job has been to help scale the company. It has also been to help provide the digital layer horizontally across the organization to get it operating and running remotely with a distributed workforce and to do it efficiently. And that goes from sales and accounting all the way to project management and even post CRM type activities and marketing. With that being said, the types of analytics and data that we've been able to innovate on has been significant, and it has been rewarding at the same time in order to be able to accelerate rapid change in an industry that has arguably not seen this kind of rapid change before. And with that being said, that has been my job at Novus, and it's been a true pleasure to work on behalf of Novus as well. So with that being said, I would like to introduce our first speaker. And the first speaker is Chris Krebs. Chris is the owner and CEO, chief negotiator of Novus Building Services. And Chris's company has been in business for 9 to 10 years and working primarily in the multifamily renovation space, and has grown significantly from a company operating out of the Northern Virginia, DC metro area all the way to South Florida and serving the Southeast region of the United States. With that being said, Chris, I'd like to turn it over to you and to ask you a few questions and get this conversation started. So guys, thank you very much, and let's get started, okay? So Chris, can you hear us, Chris?
I can hear you, and I just unmuted myself. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you for joining. It's always a pleasure. And so Chris, if I could ask you first, how has in your opinion, how has the pandemic and the lockdown affected the construction industry specifically? And feel free to expand upon that conversation or that question.
Sure. On new construction, as long as the geographic footprint isn't too large, which we've discussed earlier, they're plowing forward. We're still signing contracts and pre-purchasing materials. We're also wrapping up jobs. We have not stopped fabricating countertops for new construction. And Novus specifically starts with fabricating quartz and granite countertops on the East Coast. So new construction has not slowed down. Now, renovating multifamily apartment renovation, there's a psychology to interpersonal mingling, moving. We need vacancies typically. We do some occupied renovations. However, specifically, the vacancies have now caught up with the non-move outs. And there's a psychological effect there with COVID-19. People stop traveling, the quarantining in the major markets on the East Coast, which is only place we really work, or the suburbs around the major markets. So we were technically considered essential in construction and manufacturing. We fabricated through those vacancies. We had a 36% drop in April. We're looking at another even continuing to drop our production rate for May based on the vacancies. The renovated vacancies have caught up with the non-move outs. That's how it's directly affected Novus.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you sharing that. And with that being said, Chris, how would you respond to how you think the Novus team is responding to the situation? I have my own thoughts and opinions on that, which I'll layer on, but I'd like to get your insight as well.
I think we started, which I didn't understand, a digital transformation right at 2 years ago. which would be in the March of 18. And I remember going, you pulled me aside and said, this is going to take a long time and be really expensive, because we had to flip from analog equipment to a true digital process, which where we're running robots essentially now. And then how do you feed a robot? It's not manual, right? So, but to the question, I think our team has the ones that saw the path, and that was probably the most difficult thing when we started was getting legacy employees to see a path in a digital transformation, which I'm sure a lot of companies are dealing with today. It was not easy, and we lost most of them. And we had to replace most of those employees with buy-in and new employees that did buy-in. I think with the software and the real-time active database that we've implemented, the team has reduced in size, is more efficient, and our output is greater with less. We're whittling down on the mistakes. We have not figured it out yet, but there is a tangible difference in those.
That's great. Yeah. So you would say that the company's running a lot leaner, a lot stronger, through the digital processes that are currently in place, not only in the manufacturing facility, but out in the field as well.
Right. And what the digital process has done, and this was an unintended effect for me, was it removed obstacles, and then it allowed accountability to be linear in the field, in accounting, in production, in you name it, sales. I'm a salesman. I'm accountable to production on what we sell, and it removed those obstacles and the excuses. It requires more efficiency because there's the shadows are a lot thinner.
Sure, and that's a great metaphor, in which leads to the next question. With that being said, in your opinion, how has the supply chain been affected with construction material availability, to tariffs, in order to complete projects on site, and geographically distributed up and down the East Coast from Boston to Miami? And do we have enough construction material available to undertake new projects in the current environment? How would you answer that one?
There was in our business, which is slabs. We sling slabs, quartz, granite. We bring them in volume. There was a residual hangover from the Chinese tariff situation and anti-dumping, so that messed with our pricing a little bit. There was a mild panic. Now, what's happened now is most of the suppliers in countertops were well stocked. Now, when you go to the cabinet side, like the ACPIs of the world shut down in Pennsylvania, almost immediately. So that affected multifamily move-outs, which they service the largest share of multifamily renovation. So it wasn't necessarily the countertops; it was the cabinet guys that helped slow it down, right? Then,
sure.
Now, the last thing would be one of our main suppliers did build a shop right outside of Charleston to fabricate quartz, which is an India-based company. And they're flying high with the people that actually need their material.
Yeah, and Chris, just to continue on with the last question, based on your insight, I think there's been a real psychological effect to this whole thing, particularly with the psychology of Americans moving and what that means in the multifamily residential space. You kind of answered that earlier, but I just kind of wanted, the last two questions were specifically around what your thoughts were around the psychology of Americans currently right now with moving and what that means. And then lastly, budgeting for third-party management companies. And would love to hear your insight on that as well.
I think Americans are getting antsy. They're ready. I think we're going to change our interaction for the remainder of time, which means cleanliness, chemically cleaning, what goes into that, how we interact, how close we get, reservations, all of that. But I do think Americans are ready to hit the streets again. I'm curious to see that we as Americans have subsidized, made it more profitable in some instances not to work than to work. So I'm curious to see how we'll flip that back out as the economy rolls back up. Now, we're taking orders just this week from companies that have been dead in the water for 6-7 weeks, and those third-party management companies that you mentioned, and I'm not sure if any of them are on the phone today or on the webinar. I know they budgeted for 2020. I know forbearances and rents is not a free get out of jail free card. So they're not going to lose their money, but they may lose tenants. I am curious to see how that shakes out. But we are seeing the well-capitalized companies are starting to breathe again, starting Monday of this week.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you for your insight. Truly appreciate it. That was wonderful. Chris, we'll obviously open up the forum for Q&A session with you at the end for people that have specific questions for you specifically. But Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to be a guest today and to
thank you.
help answer some of these outstanding questions. And guys, I also, if I could, I do want to apologize for a moment. I do need to introduce Sandesh Joshi of Indovance. Sandesh, Mr. Joshi, I do apologize to you. This is the first time I've ever done something like this, and there is no script. So I'm having to innovate at the tip of my tongue. So with that being said, Mr. Joshi, thank you so much for doing this. And I just wanted to introduce you. Mr. Joshi is the CEO of Indovance. And I don't know if Mr. Joshi would like anything to say, but Mr. Joshi, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm just going to make a quick comment. Thank you, Garrett, for moderating this. Thank you, Chris. We have Robert and also Jerry, who's going to participate in this webinar. This webinar is, we Indovance works with so many engineering architectural firms, and our team wanted to really get the experts in the same room, and everybody around the world is affected by COVID-19. We just appreciate all of you for your time today to talk about this. So let me hand it really back to you, Garrett. You're doing a great job. Let's continue with this discussion. This is really relevant for all of us, for the whole community. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, Mr. Joshi. And sorry for going off script, but I'm learning. So yeah. Anyway, thank you, and it is a true pleasure. So moving on to our next speaker, guys. It is a pleasure to introduce Jerry Perales of Perales Engineering. He is the president of Perales Engineering, based out of Austin, Texas. Myself, growing up in South Texas, knows all of the good food that is down there. So, Jerry, I know that the restaurants have been closed for a while, but I'm sure that the good Tex-Mex food is going to come back at some point. Yeah. With that being said, Jerry, pleasure to have you on the call today. And Jerry's company, Perales Engineering, is primarily focused in land development, from conception all the way to development. With that being said, Jerry, thank you for joining today. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
That's great. And let me find. So, Jerry, I think one of the questions I had for you, what, in your opinion, were some of the major challenges that you think are hampering let's just say, the normal functioning of the construction industry? How would you describe that?
Well, from the beginnings of it, I mean, we haven't been able to meet with an architect or meet with landscape architects or surveyors or anything like that. So now the Zoom world is kind of taking over. So when you're trying to conceptualize a site, we've got a piece of dirt that needs to be figured out. What's the highest and best use for it? So now we're using Skype to figure out even, that portion of it to getting the teams together. But then, once you've got submittals into the cities and trying to get things actually permitted, you've already got your designs going. So now even, working with reviewers is that, everyone is scrambling to figure out, well, how do we review things? And I mean, on every single level, from, all we're doing is conceptualizing to actually trying to get a permit from the fire department. And the fire department's trying to figure out, well, I've signed your plans, but how do I get them to you, And us scrambling to figure out, okay, well, and we can send them to a printing company because the file is so big, he doesn't even know how to use any of the softwares because they're so old school, So even trying to teach, the older gentleman that may be working with AFD and the Austin Fire Department, and the younger people knowing how to use, Zoom, right down to City Council and Planning Commission, and trying to get subdivisions approved and having fights with the neighborhood groups. And a lot of them still want to meet on site, with masks, ready to fight. And, but, Zoom is pretty much taking a lot of that aggression right out of it. So there's pluses and minuses of all that stuff that, it's still slowing it down no matter what. Planning Commission has so many holdups on trying to have these Skype meetings and still have public forums to be able to discuss in a legitimate way everybody's concern about a particular development. And so that seems to me the hardest thing is how do you actually get through some of these discussions on, the large office building we wanted to build down the street. And, is it relevant to even discuss, is office a valid use of a building anymore? That came up last night in Planning Commission. So, I mean, these kind of things that are just brand new, and we're still pushing hard on office buildings. We're still designing everything. So, and acting as if they're like the one question down there, is the bubble really going to break? Nobody's really planning for that. We all think that it's all going to fix. And the city of Austin has been moving very hard to try and take electronic submittals for the last decade and haven't been successful. Even though the small communities around Austin have already made it so electronic submittals for plans is standard, now Austin is forced to. All the reviews now, I can call them directly on the phone, we can meet over emails, and it's now become almost more fluid. So there's no way to really know how it's going to come out. I know that I'm actually able to get permits more fluidly with staff. Getting it through council, again, it's all just so new. So kind of that's my input on normal functioning. What is it?
Sure, and that's a great response. I think it really goes towards the efforts that I think the whole world is trying to make that digital leap. And for those that have not made that leap, they're pretty much being forced to make that digital leap. And that really starts at the core foundation of the company all the way to how people collaborate and communicate. And it definitely sounds like you are at least able to be somewhat ahead of the curve with dealing with that by proxy of knowing how to use some of the technology at your disposal. And in some instances,
Matt, truly, Indovance. So I have a lot to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on that one. Having solid third-party partners that can help offload I wouldn't call it the burden, but some of the abilities to be leaner and to do things more proficiently and efficiently. I would agree with you with there as well. Indovance has definitely been a good partner on that one. And Jerry, with that being said, it sounds like your working from home strategy is going pretty well.
Yeah.
You seem pretty relaxed there.
I've been doing it now for
how are you adapting, and is working from home effective for you?
Well, I've always kind of liked it and preferred it, and I've kind of pushed it since the beginning. But in my office is, it's very open for that. And in fact, some of the old school employees were like, no, you need to be chained to your desk, and that's not how I function. And they're no longer with the company. And really, the meat of my company is Indovance now, as far as CAD production staff. My project management staff is all, local and 100% billable. So it just makes it so that I'm actually able to overperform while everybody else is still trying to figure out how to get their CAD staff at home and still produce. I never missed a beat. And so, in fact, we've been gaining steam. So
Jerry, I would agree with that. And we have found similar efficiencies as well. We've been able to quadruple our efforts in multiple areas, specifically when it comes to some of the technical proficiencies on the estimating side, including on even some of the AutoCAD development for basically getting files back to our CNC machines. We can literally drop them from anywhere in the world and have them ready at the CNC machine at any given moment in time. And all it takes is someone in the manufacturing facility to essentially be there to load a slab on the table and go from there. So we agree with you. There has been definitely some efficiencies that we were looking into months ago that have definitely are paying dividends now. And I think you're seeing the same thing as well. And with that being said, Jerry, how are you completing the projects at hand? And with that being said, is resource availability a challenge to you?
Well, for me, it's mostly about production of plans. So my plan production is actually increased with the staff from Indovance. So I've let go all local CAD staff because honestly, they were too slow and too expensive. And just the way, bottom line, and it's improved my image because now instead of 5 weeks for a plan set to come out 67% complete, we have 2 weeks and I've got it at 80%. So it's just better. So that right there is, and I maybe I'm ahead of the curve because I started it a year ago trying to figure this out because I just knew the other way wasn't working. And I've been running big teams with Jacobs Engineering and the big companies for a long time, and then leaving and trying to do this on my own. It's like I don't understand how they even operate like that with that kind of overhead, and you see the kind of costs that come out directed directly to the clients. Oh, well, that's going to be 100,000 instead of 10. That's their overhead they carry. So it's making a significant impact. People say,
and Jerry, yeah, and with that being said, Jerry, I know, I don't want to put you on the spot here. 3 to 6 months outlook from now for you. What are your general thoughts on that, specifically for you and your business and for the overall construction business? How do you view that?
Well, I see it in a lot of ways the way that the magazines kind of call and ask, what's in permit, what's in construction. They look up all the stuff at the city that's in permit. So to see what I'm ramping up as far as what am I designing, what's actually in permit, what's actually in construction. I have more in conceptual right now than in construction. I have more in conceptual than I have in permitting because everybody's pulling the trigger. It's very interesting. Some people are selling their projects that are from California that are like, okay, I'm done with Texas, you know, because of California. But, you know, it's completely different here. And sell it. It's going to be a win. So we have not, because I'm in the current process of moving from my multifamily building, which is going to have to be completely refurbished because I've been here 6 years, to a home on the lake because I don't want to live downtown. I don't have to go to my office anymore. I can work from here. I'm going to keep my office so there's an address, but at that, why do I need it? So, I mean, it's completely changed all of that. It's made everything. Sure. In fact, for me, it's made working a little more manageable so I can be with my family and be 100% like the whole person.
Sure, and I think that's probably one of the side effects to this all, that we try to find the silver linings when we can, no matter what's going on and whatever we're presented with or challenged with. And it definitely sounds like you have found some of those silver linings, and that's great to hear. And Jerry, was there anything specific that you wanted to mention regarding anything else going on that you see that you would like to address to the audience today?
No, I think that's really comprehensive. If there's any questions, I'd love to answer them, but thank you for the time that you've given me.
Awesome. Well, Jerry, thank you again, and thank you for allowing me to ask you these questions as well. And guys, if you guys want to ask Jerry questions, we'll certainly take questions in the last 15 minutes or so, and then we can extend it beyond with Chris and Jerry and our next speaker. So with that being said, Jerry, thank you so much for your time today, sir. I really appreciate it. And moving on to our next speaker, we have Robert Roseen. He's the principal and owner of Waterstone Engineering. And thank you for joining today, Robert. And really wanted to start off by introducing you, introducing your company, and what you do. And I do apologize, Dr. Robert Roseen. So I do apologize, Dr. Roseen. Yeah, sorry. Again,
not a problem at all. Thank you, Garrett.
So,
you're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Dr. Roseen, thank you for joining. And just really wanted to start off by asking how you're doing, how you're adapting, and the insights that you're seeing with your business, with the overall renovation construction business as a whole, and obviously looking for truly your insight. But with that being said, I'm just going to bluntly ask you, how has the situation affected your work, field work, on-site work, and what are you doing to address this challenge?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question and the opportunity to speak with everybody here today. The prior speakers here offer important and kind of unique perspectives. I think we all cover kind of different aspects of the industry, and it's a very diverse industry. So, I mean, I think it's been hitting on a number of levels. And I'm just going to kind of go down a list, if that's okay, and I'll try and do it briefly, but just kind of hit, because the details are important, and there's a lot of different nuances here. So, so I'd say for active construction projects, I'd say we really have not seen an impact. And these are projects that are rolling, and in where I live in the Northeast, these have been considered critical services, and I do see the states managing it differently. For example, Massachusetts requires a fair amount of personal protection, and when I say a fair amount, I should step that way back. Modest personal protection, because fair amount, I would say, would really go more to like facilities where people are in close contact. So in construction sites, civil site construction, a lot of this is outdoors, and the type of things that we see here are just simply having people wear masks, hand washing stations, things like that. Whereas in New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont, I have seen none of that. Still the social distancing, but no masks, no hand washing stations. I'm sure they're probably around somewhere, maybe on the state projects. And I would say that so those are active construction projects. I will say that in New York and in Michigan, I have seen projects that have been either put on hold or that there has been no active construction in some locations. So for new construction projects, I've seen that it's sort of been mixed. Some projects have been delayed. I have a project in Detroit that has been put on hold that we've just received notice that it's now been allowed to proceed. So that it's essentially been on hold. I would say probably about 8 weeks, maybe more. Some projects have been canceled, and I think these are projects that have been canceled because of the financing, where these would be private projects where where the equity of the private financiers has been heavily impacted. And then on sort of that new project front, the project approvals have slowed tremendously. So to hear Mr. Perales talk about the process, we've absolutely seen that different towns managing it different ways. One of the small towns I work in has they have basically put all public meetings on hold. This is a small town that doesn't have much of a staff, but they have a very professional staff. So I wouldn't say that they just simply haven't felt the need to hold public meetings, public hearings. So what that means is that project approvals have really ground to a halt. Now I do expect that to change, whereas other towns, some of them you see them doing it all in conference calls, or others we're now moving into the Zoom realm. So things are proceeding, but proceeding more slowly. State approvals, same thing. Governors have passed notices basically bypassing, in the case of New Hampshire, there's certain time requirements that are generally required for approvals. Those time requirements have generally been put on hold. So construction supply chains have definitely been affected. I wouldn't say it's ground to a halt at all, but have just a moment here. I have a son arriving.
It's live webinar. It happens.
All right. Hopefully, sorry about that. Just reeled them all in. We'll see how long that lasts. The wonders of working from home. There we go.
Yeah. It's live, and you can't control some of those events.
Usually, I have them work. They're in the basement, and I hear the weights or the pucks being shot off the walls in the basement.
That's great. No problem. Dr. Roseen, I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
Oh yeah, please. Let's do it.
It's very poignant what you said, and I think just to layer on that, is there anything that you think other firms that may be listening to this conversation that you feel, or different states, different cities, different ordinances, different laws, how do you foresee things shaking out 3 to 6 months from now? Do you think there's going to be more of a shared collaboration effort to solve things, or do you think the information will be siloed and people will try to figure it out on their own? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, it's a great question, Garrett, and certainly, with your background in R&D and digital transformation, I mean, you are, in some respects, you could be the the savior for a lot of this. Now, there's a lot of industry, right, that has to work in close quarters, where I frankly, I'm not sure where, how some of those things would work. But in some of the industry, there's the digital transformation, just as we've been hearing from prior speakers, is a big deal, and this will only help to accelerate that. One of the greatest inefficiencies that we see out there is meetings. Now, I have more meetings now than I've ever had, so I'm not sure that we've gained efficiencies, frankly, on that front.
Sure.
But once we get a hold of this and really kind of learn how to work with the new toy per se, I can see it having a very, very positive impact. Here really a bit of a shout out to Indovance. Because of the purely digital platform that we have working with Indovance here, it's been it has really been one of the best aspects for me through this is we've all managed very well. We already work together digitally. And, that isn't to say that the COVID crisis doesn't kind of seep in at some corners everywhere, and we all see it. But the digital transformation part has worked really well. And, where do I see it in 3 to 6 months? I think, if any recommendations, and unfortunately it's so hard to make changes on the fly, but the more diverse our client sector, the better it is in so many ways. And because the way I in my industry, in the construction and design industry, we see the 2008 recession is a good example, and this will actually probably be quite different than the 2008. But we saw that the federal and municipal sectors really didn't slow rapidly at all in 2008 because they build their budgets 12 to 24 months in advance. So a lot of that stuff's in the pipeline. So, and in the case of state often gets their money through federal, at least in the world of clean water. So that's often even 18 to 24 or more months delayed. So that's a great thing, right? The lag is roughly 2 years there, but that also means that they're the last to slow, but they're also the last to recover. So we saw in the 2008 recession, some of those impacts didn't pick up until 4 or 5 years later. In contrast, the private sector was the first to slow, but the first to respond, to pick up again. And that's for a variety of reasons. That some of the investors, their money simply evaporates with the market drop, but there are also a lot of equity folks who simply pull the money out in terms of caution, and then once they feel that things are safe, they then are looking to put it back in. And I think we will see a lot of that. And we actually see that if you look at the market, you'll see that the stock market, in some respects, is fairly strong right now, why people, you hear people say again and again, the stock market is not the economy, right? So, but what the stock market is that's the professional and investor class that have maybe been less impacted than some of the other aspects of this world. So it's going to be interesting to see how those parts shake out. I suspect we will see that that there will be a lot of investment fairly soon because the stock market is strong, and that could really differentiate between the 2008 recession where the stock market was crushed. So there's some thoughts for you.
Dr. Roseen, I really appreciate you laying on those thoughts. I think we've entered into a time where ideas and concepts like artificial intelligence and machine learning, things of that nature, are going to start being applied to the renovation and construction side of the business, from whether it's pre-construction planning all the way to post-construction planning, all the way to data analytics. That seems to be the topic, and that is going to be readily addressed here very soon. And with that being said,
Garrett, that if I could just pile on that last point, it is a great point. Now, who knows where that will go? but there's been talk for some time about the use of AI for essentially doing a pandemic forecasting similar to what we have for weather forecasting. And if you look at the sort of the worldwide impacts of having to shut down or quarantine, which are undeniable. Now, again, the market may be doing well, but there are other parts of the economy that are crushed. You know, the unemployment is going to be unbelievable. If we had a pandemic forecasting ability that, you know, in the same respects, is one of the things we will see here, right? Part of why I think the construction industry is doing so well in the North is that this is happening in the spring, summertime. We would just be picking up anyhow from the slowdown that naturally occurs in the wintertime. What we don't know is what's going to happen in the winter here, and we're going to have, presumably, we're going to have a fall winter flu season that will pick back up. So there's that aspect of the pandemic, but then there's also the natural cycle that happens for us in the construction industry, where a lot of the site work goes inside, and if this flu season is cycling again, we won't be able to go inside in the same respect. So the need for pandemic forecasting, you know, obviously that's outside of our industry. That's at a governmental level, but that could be a huge important need for that. So there we go.
Sure, Dr. Roseen, I appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. It goes to show you that we have a lot to learn about ourselves, and a lot to learn about our teams that we work with, and that we have a lot of work to learn more about our gaps and our deficiencies, and how we, you know, gear ourselves more towards a performance-based performance plan. The current situation we are in has basically accelerated that, and which is in some ways it's like I said, I think we need to look at it as trying to look at this as an opportunity and a challenge rather than anything else. Dr. Roseen, thank you so much for joining us today. Guys, we have about 15. Yeah, Dr. Roseen, thank you so much, sir. I do have a couple questions here that came in, and I would like to turn these questions over to Chris Krebs, Dr. Roseen, and Jerry. And I'm going to go ahead and just read a couple of them. And Jerry, Chris, or Robert, please, Dr. Roseen, please feel free to answer any of those. And some of them we have touched on, but I just want to give them an opportunity. So one of them was, how is the architect involved midstream of a project now that a site coordinator asked him for his input? Is there anything that you guys can touch upon with this panel right here?
I have input. I mean, knowing that, like, we always have changes that are happening, and I guess that I'm just trying to interpret the question as saying, you know, the midstream of the project, meaning midstream for a site coordinator, and midstream construction, meaning you need to ask the architect questions about, say, grading or steps or how that pipe's going to work, and he's not able to give input, I guess. And again, it ends up being Zoom meetings with these guys. It's so hard to get on site now with everybody there. That's been really strange. So that, I guess that's kind of what he's having a problem with, and it's definitely learning the technology that's out there now to be able to reach out to the project coordinator and figure out what is the direct input. And then when they ask these really strange questions that you're trying to visualize his problem in the field, which is normally he's going to be pointing at it, right? Again, technology isn't going to be a smartphone showing him, because it's almost impossible for me to find a solution for something if I'm not on the ground looking at it. So, and I know that's probably the problem that they're coming into, is how do we ask the questions of the professionals when we're busy trying to just stay on schedule building something. So, and it's learning technology. Sure. That's my
sure. That seems to be the prevailing thought here. One of which I think open collaboration and communication for shared mutual benefit is one of the overriding factors here, that, not to say that we're not thinking about, but I think that everyone needs to accept. that we all gain from each other's perspective, and that we all gain from each other's insight. And I think forums like this are very much a value-added solution in order to gain knowledge and experience for what other people are seeing in different regions of the country. For what you're seeing, Jerry, in South Texas, with Dr. Roseen seeing things up in the Boston, New Hampshire area, with Chris seeing things in the Washington, D.C. metro area and all the way down to the South Florida area. And with that being said, guys, I do have a couple more questions. What we have is the effect of automation on civil engineering, especially in the design sector. Would anybody like to take on that question? And I pretty much think we've covered a lot of these things already. So if the audience wants to ask any, go ahead, Jerry.
Well, I mean, there's so many things that, and I'm not sure what his level of, because the civil engineering, that's a really broad field here. So, but for me, it would be wonderful if I could have a computer be able to analyze a site, and come up with, say, how to design the drainage. Because I mean, at university, that's what we did. We used GIS to create preprocessors to delineate watershed, and so you could stick it into HMS, and it would just blow out your answers. So it would be amazing to be able to say, here's my architectural plan, hit a button, boom, there's my ENS, my erosion and sedimentation control plan. There's my site plan dimension control plan. Here's my utility connections, by AI being able to analyze the site, analyze the existing conditions, and being able to come up with solutions as an engineer. Again, that would be, for me, the next level. But again, is that realistic? I don't know.
Well, I appreciate you voicing that, and I no doubt that people will be working on that somehow, some way in the background. In which, an interesting question just came in that it's been on my mind for quite some time, which was the question of does anyone see the use of 3D printing in the future for precast concrete? And this is a very interesting question, and something that I think I'd love to hear thoughts around that, Jerry or Dr. Roseen or Chris.
I could use it right now for below grade detention systems that don't have to be concrete even. They could be plastic. They could be some other compound. All I really need is, cavities, and so these printers could crank them out. Who knows, Storm Tank and all those different people, Paint Corps, probably already using that for all I know. But my underground detention and things like that, all pipes could be printed. If you get the right material.
Sure, that's great. That's a field that has been burgeoning for quite a while, and I think we're going to see a lot of interesting developments around 3D printing, and I think we saw a lot of innovation specifically in the past couple of months with regards to the capabilities of what it's able to do. I think you're going to see some significant increases in how in that specific field, and how that specifically relates to the renovation construction business. The ability to print on site through different composite materials, things of that nature, will definitely change the landscape of how we operate and where we operate. So that's going to be interesting. And guys, this is just a question for the audience here. Feel free to post a question to the chat bar, and we can certainly have the panel speakers answer anything you have.
Garrett, if I could throw in one thing,
please.
A next step for at least the courts countertops, it would be extremely beneficial if we could find a way to set up once we solve the shake problem and the curing problem of quartz or some composite close to its consistency, we could, it would be awesome to not have to ship truckloads full of fabricated material, but just put one printer on site in a small shed and print out pieces as needed specifically for new construction, I could see a massive benefit there. You know, and I would love that. You know, and I was going to think through the AI side of it. You know, I think we're still about a decade and a half behind in our fabrication business as a group in renovations, though. In the IT or digital advancement, which you've seen for subcontracting in renovation, there's a lot of work.
Sure.
This will catapult that, whether it's the fourth industrial revolution, like we've talked about, or just forcing change quickly. I think we're going to see some good things come from it.
Sure. And Chris, with that being said, Vicky had asked a question from the audience. She was curious to hear more about supply chain. She's indicated that it's been directly affecting us in Maryland, and that many of the GCs and subs and suppliers located in PA and Ohio are completely shut down, and it's causing massive delays in some of the projects. I definitely think that's a question for you, Chris.
Right. We stayed open in both fabrication shops. Now we did deal with a negative psychological effect from COVID. The guys didn't want to go to states where there was a total shutdown, media driven or not, whether it's Jersey, PA, New York. They did not want to go up there. So I could see where those fabricators, subs, vendors are just we're stopping until this thing blows over. For Novus's sake, I have had the opportunity to be around several chemists and how they're analyzing the situation and with how they think this is going to shake out from a medical perspective. And, you know, it's and specifically for Novus, once our guys realized that we were going to stay open and that we were taking the proper precautions and helping, providing our employees with the proper, whether it's masks, gloves, cleaning equipment, whatever it was, they kind of got over that fear and would go to PA, Maryland, New York, or Boston, or Jersey, but they wanted to be isolated on those projects. So it's kind of a new evolution of how scheduling is going to have to be done, at least in the renovation side. So and I know we have one of our strong partners here in the area. I think an effect we'll see with political, financial, there's going to be a reduction in the tax base for these some of these northern cities like New York, where people aren't going to come back, and I think a lot of them aren't coming back, or they're going to leave, which I think could shift some of that tax base to South Florida, which was definitely not an unintended political effect. I think, and the analytics are showing it from like apartments.com, how the percentage use and where it's from New York to South Florida. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out too.
Sure, and Chris, that's great insight, and something that I think we all can benefit from. So do appreciate that. Thank you, Chris. In the audience, is free to ask any questions they would like. And guys, we have about a minute left here.
Can I say one more? I gotta say it. You put me on this culture series of books a couple years ago. This is playing right into the pandemic here, which is Ian Banks. It's an 11-part series, The Culture.
Ian and Banks.
Yeah. And how we, this AI is going to suddenly wrap itself through our culture and our being in day-to-day life. I think it's suddenly here.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think Dr. Roseen touched upon that too, from forecasting all the way to how we learn, and I think and how we do our day-to-day business for sure. Chris, that goes without saying that it's something we're all going to have to contend with, and I think with that being said, to the group here, it's not a threat; it's an actual advantage, because creativity has now risen to the top as being the single foremost knowledgeable skill set available at our disposal, just due to the rapid increase in technology and the rapid increase of how we use technology. So that space is going to be very interesting for all industries across the world, no matter where you are, what you do, and how you do it. And when I say no matter where you are, it could be here or it could be in space. With that being said, I think there are a lot of things we can learn from this, and I am hoping that we can continue this conversation again with this panel and with the speakers and with Indovance and with the registered people that have decided to register for this and watch this. And with that being said, guys, I did want to quickly thank Team Indovance for hosting this. Mr. Joshi, Dr. Joshi, thank you so much, and I do apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. Sandesh, Mr. Joshi, thank you so much. Aditi, and thank you so much, guys, for allowing us to do this forum today.
Thank you.
Thank you all, guys.
Appreciate your time, guys. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Indovance. I appreciate it.
And one last thing here, if I could, to the group and to the people that registered for this event. If you'd like to see this recording and the slides, just email jason@indovance.com, and he will certainly make sure that he gets this information and the slide and this presentation to you, and we'll go from there. I don't know if anyone from Team Indovance wanted to say anything or not, and if not, we can go from there. Jason or Mr. Joshi, I'll leave the floor to you guys.
I think we are good to go. Let's wrap up. Thank you again to the whole panel, and I hope all of our attendees today also found this conversation helpful. So thank you all once again, and have a great day everybody.